All right, here we are. Time for our second masterclass video. That being about how you can best prepare for your next MUN conference.
Right.
Now, as you're preparing for that, there's essentially two parts or two focuses you have to have as you prepare. The first one is understanding the issue, right? You're going to know what you will be preparing for in your committee. And then the other one is that, what is actually your country's position within all of this debate. So let's first, talk about how we can actually research the issue that we'll be talking about. And I think the first topic here is the study guide, or the first means of research.
Right. This is always kind of kicking off the topic. You will receive usually a few weeks before the conference a document by the organizers, by your chair, that kind of outlines the topics that you will discuss. There's, better and worse study guides, with close to everything. Ideally, there's a few questions a resolution must answer. And what I always felt is the most important thing to get out of a study guide is the scope, kind of what's still within the topic and what's not. But that's a personal preference.
Yep. No, that's really, really good. But of course, the study guide isn't the only thing that is going to prepare you well for the conference. Indeed, if you only prepare with the study guide, you will probably be lost.
Right.
So the next thing is essentially what you would do during any research, I would assume, is start Googling.
But for this, actually, to kind of broaden your research, what I always found super helpful was the sources the study guide gives. Because often your chair who prepared the study guide will have some sources in the back or in the footers or something. Check out those sources. They're a great springboard to start your research. And while your teachers and everyone will recommend you not to use Wikipedia because it's not a proper scientific source, honestly, I felt it's a great way to just start understanding the problem, and again, use the sources. Because in the bottom of the Wikipedia pages, you'll have the sources that will be great to kind of, go out and kind of understand more detail what the issue really is.
That is very much true. And what you can also do, what I always like to do is, from Googling, you're going to find BBC summaries of the issue, or timelines, or from Al Jazeera. Documentaries, maybe even things on YouTube, these days by Vice or I don't even know. There is stuff out there. Obviously, always be aware of biases and stuff like that. But it's kind of interesting, to get a Russia Today kind of perspective on issues. So, I mean, those are the basics, right?
One last thing I would add is get creative about your research. Reach out if you're talking about the topic is, say, climate change. Reach out to people who do research, people who are climate activists, or people who might have this or that stance on an issue in real life. Honestly, I felt that is one of the most rewarding things I ever got out of MUN was, getting in touch with real life people about real issues, and thereby expanding my horizon by just, endless.
Now, I'm going to call that a level 2 research.
Yes. Start reading the study guide and then go from there.
Now, but what I would say is that Googling around a bit is essential, because that allows you to get a sense for where the conflict or the situation is at right now. And that is really important to know, just so you're up to date. And then a study guide is essential. And a third really, really essential thing, I believe, is going in depth on the UN documents and UN resolutions.
Let's dive in what those are all about.
Let's have a closer look at what that might look like. And let's, for that purpose, assume you, Jonas, are the delegate of some country in the Security Council, say Russia, and you're going to have to debate on the situation in Libya.
See you in a bit.
All right, here we are. As we mentioned, UN resolutions and UN documents in general are one of the most important bits and valuable bits of research you can do as an MUN delegate. Now, today we are researching, as just sort of an example, to show you kind of the method. We're going to research the situation in Libya. Now, what we do, we are obviously a delegate in the Security Council. As we are on the United Nations Security Council page where they list all their resolutions. Now, if we scroll a little bit further down, There's one resolution. We're not going to go into that one. We're going to go a little bit earlier. So obviously, if we were actually doing research, we would look at that one. But that's so new that we haven't actually included that in the preparation for this video yet. We're going to look at this one from 3rd of June, situation in Libya. Let's have a look at what this exactly looks like. It's going to load, and this is finally what an actual UN resolution looks like. So we have a bit of a title here. We're going to start scrolling down, having a look at what is happening here. We see some preambulatory clauses. And aside from being very difficult to pronounce, they also provide us with a lot of links to other resolutions and documents. And they also often give insights into reports that may have been done for the Security Council or whatever committee you're dealing with. So those will be really interesting to dig into as part of your research. Not all of them will be super interesting to read, but some, if not many of them will. So you should definitely do that. For now, we're going to focus firstly on the operative clauses. So that is all those sentences or phrases that really take action. And we're going to scroll down a little bit further. Down here we see, acting under Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations. So there's some very strong operative clauses and measures being taken there. And the first one here extends authorizations set out in a previous resolution, and that is referring to Resolution 2526 from 2020 and extends those authorizations. I don't know. I have no idea what those authorizations are about. So let's go and find out. Let's have a look at those. This is not interactive. We just have Jonas in the background clicking all of those things. So now we're back in Resolution 2526. We look down. It actually looks really similar to the last one. Are they just doing copy-paste at the UN? Well, we'll find out. They just do the same thing as the previous one. But they extend those measures from Resolution 2473. So we found a link to that resolution up there. Let's have a look at that. It's from 2019 now. Let's see what those authorizations are. It's the same thing again. All right. Once again, Resolution 2420 from 2018. Let's have a look at that. Clickety-click. Click at it. And it's the same thing again. 2357. Click at that. So we're just going down the rabbit hole. A lot of that, like UN resolution and UN document research, really feels like just going down a rabbit hole. And no, we're at the same thing again. 2292. Let's go back to 2016 and see what that that looks like a bigger one. Exciting stuff. So we have again a bunch of preambulatory clauses which are a lot more comprehensive. For now, though, we're not going to dig into those. Although, what is obviously interesting, they're referring to a whole bunch of more resolutions. So we would definitely want to look into those if we were to really do this research properly right now. But we are just doing some of the methods. So we're scrolling down a little bit further and having a look now at the operative clauses, which come all the way further down. And those ones look juicy. So let's have a look again, acting on Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations. And let's have a closer look at operative clause number 1 now, which was on the previous page up here. And it condemns the flow of arms and related material transferred to or from Libya in violation of the arms embargo. Right now, things are getting interesting. We're now talking about an arms embargo, including to ISIL and other terrorist groups in Libya. So this doesn't refer to any authorizations yet, but it tells us a lot because we're now having an arms embargo, which we would definitely want to look into in further research to just know exactly what's going on there. We also know that ISIL now is an issue in the area, which we might have also figured out through Wikipedia or Googling. But still, it's really important. And then let's go on to operative clause number 2, and that is urges member states to combat by all means and so on and so forth, threats to international peace and security caused by terrorist acts. Very strongly worded operative clause, and especially what's really interesting here is the different types of international law they're referencing that really justifies that sort of action and under which sort of justifications member states should take action. That's super interesting, and that can be really sort of an interesting building block even for you if you in the future assemble a resolution, which you can sort of incorporate into yours, where you're referencing international human rights law, international refugee law, and so on and so forth, just to make your resolution that little bit more interesting. Now, Operative clause number 3, though, is really where things get interesting, right? Here, we decide to authorize, and so on and so forth, that vessels on the shores of Libya are inspected, are authorized to be inspected, whether they are carrying any sorts of like arms, essentially, or anything that would be in violation of our arms embargo. So now we know what our authorizations are about. We know that we have an arms embargo, and we even have a lot of references to that arms embargo. And just knowing all of that, knowing that those authorizations have been carried through since 2016, so for all of 5 years now, gives us already a massive edge over other delegates. Being aware of those phrasings and the way those things are formulated really gives us a massive edge over other delegates, and it allows us to really also then reference those fundamental and core resolutions, such as this one, as we move into committee and debate. So we're not going to dive into all of that anymore, but we hope we got a sense for how to do great research based on UN documents. All right, so now we know how to do research based on UN resolutions. What actually is oftentimes more interesting than doing work on resolutions and researching in resolutions is researching in UN reports, which were made for like the Security Council or other councils, because they often even include recommendations for action to be taken. And that can just be really, really valuable because, well, obviously,
if they recommend it,
it's probably pretty good. And if it's in line with your country policy, you can essentially just copy that and those ideas.
If you tell me that you're a copycat.
I mean, it's not plagiarism if it's just like, you would still have to write an operative clause out of it. But also actually, one thing that is something you can do if you have researched or like worked really well with draft resolutions like that, you can really get inspired by those operative clauses if you at some point maybe have to write something similar in your resolution. Anyway, enough about that. We know about the issues now, but the real question a lot of the first-time delegates ask themselves is how can we figure out what our country's position is? And obviously that's really, really difficult, especially if you're a small nation that might not really have a distinct policy on a certain issue. Jonas, what do you reckon we can do about that if that is the case?
Right. Well, there's a number of cases, but this is really the edge case of, you're representing. I remember representing Uruguay in some Middle East affair. It's tough, but there's a few things. So I would start off by recommending, if you have any friends from there or from the region, reach out to them. Google explicitly for their country's position also. Maybe you find international newspapers from Uruguay that have a certain, let's say, tone where you can kind of read something from between the lines. Another thing I would absolutely highlight is that, well, while Uruguay might not have so much of a position, how about neighboring countries or other countries with a similar developing level and position in the region? Sometimes you have like international kind of bodies, like you have the EU or you have ASEAN that kind of might have a position, a joint position that you can research, would be the kind of third point I would highlight. And of course, you may want to try your casual way of research through internet research. The CIA fact book is absolutely a great asset.
But isn't that biased from the Americans?
It probably is. Nevertheless, if anyone knows, then it's the CIA, and if they share it publicly, let's use it.
And they have like one-page summaries actually for like countries, which is super, super valuable.
It's super great. And so we're going to put all of those links that we have for research down in the comments, so you can access them straight away.
It's at the end of the day really about figuring out what your country's interests are and what's important to your country. And what can also obviously help there is just classic things, Wikipedia. Also reading up sort of on what's in those countries' news.
Yes.
So that really gets you a sense for what is happening within your country. There might always be that freak delegate in your committee who knows a little bit about your country, and if they know more about your country than yourself, then you don't want that to happen.
Actually, you can be that delegate if you just research the other countries too, but focus on your country first.
Step by step. One thing I always found kind of interesting as well is looking at things like, for example, Fragile States Index or the Freedom House Index, which also, for one, can get you a better sense of your own country and what it can do, but also gives you a sense for where you're vulnerable at.
Yep.
And at what sort of exposure points you might be attacked by other countries, and you can better prepare for that using those kind of indices. Especially like Freedom House, they have a lot of interesting explanations about how those references change as well, and what's been happening in those countries as of late. Now, you're going to figure out what your country is all about. That is done. Now, how do your country's major allies feel? That's also something, obviously, you have to first figure out who your allies are. You know, I think CIA World Factbook also has like details on trade, like who are you trading with a lot, who are you exporting a lot to, where you're exporting a lot from. Those can be indicators, if it's not even more public, what those alliances are.
Some of those might be regional bodies like ASEAN or the European Union. You might have, regions like, I don't know, North America where via NAFTA you have great collaboration. And things like this really kind of give you. NATO would be another one. You have the Shanghai Alliance. It's called, I think, somehow differently. But you have those collaboration and alliances that you really want to watch out for, because those people might be your friends.
Yeah, and what you can also think of is like, for example, if you're a country within the realm of the South China Sea and you feel a bit threatened by China, then you might probably support a position that opposes theirs. And then when it comes to figuring out their exact positions, there's obviously a lot easier ways, because they are more likely within bodies like the Security Council or other bodies to take a very clear position. Because if a resolution is published, often it comes with a UN press release, and with that often come, for example, statements from ambassadors or foreign ministers and that sort of thing, which makes things there a lot more clear-cut.
Any other things, Alex, that we absolutely want to share that helped you and me in our preparation?
Blog positions in study guides. So even in study guides, often you find references to that. And I think the most important thing, to be honest, yes, it is important, but like if you don't manage to exactly nail down your country's policy, it's not the end of the world. Like, go in there with a decent idea of what's important to you. Don't go way off that policy, but never feel like just because your country has a certain policy or position on an issue that you cannot contribute to the debate. Like if you're South Sudan and you're debating North Korea and you feel like you really have different issues, you can still get in there. You can play a mediating role, get engaged. If all countries within a committee who aren't really concerned that much wouldn't be participating, it would be very, very boring. And the same also applies obviously to how closely you are going to stick with your foreign policy. Because in MUN, if everybody sticks so closely to their foreign policy as countries do in real life, you would be doing nothing.
Just like the United Nations does most of the time.
I guess that's a fair point. Anyway, but MUN is supposed to be exciting, so don't worry about it that much. And worst case, you can always ask your chairs for pointers as well, because they will be in-depth familiar with the issue and how different countries are positioned towards them.
One last fun fact, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, one of the smallest countries in the world, was until very recently part of the United Nations Security Council, and they sure took position on issues. So if they can, you can.
Ooh, that was a good ending. All right, we're going to see you in the next video.